Good morning. I have made some very good progress on this 49 Epiphone Zephyr. And I talked to the owner and we had a discussion about originality versus usefulness. Now, this is an amp from 1949. And, the Telecaster was not on the radar yet. Leo knew about it. Very few other people knew about it. It would have been the Esquire at that point. If you had need of an electric guitar amplifier, odds are it was an arch top, and odds are it was an arch top with an added-on pickup, say a DeArmond, which may or may not have volume and tone controls. And so a lot of these early amps would have volume and tone controls on the front, just hanging off the input jacks, which is what this one did. There was also not a consensus about what kinds of pickups and impedances people would use. The impedances of early designs varied drastically. And this thing had a 1.3 meg pot on the mic input, and it had a 68K volume on the three, quote, instrument inputs. Now, 68K may be okay for some accordion pickup, terrible for guitar. The 1.3 meg is about as good as you're going to get on this. It is a grid leak bias amplifier, which means that each input went through a capacitor to then a summing point. Now that summing point was done in such a way that if you were in this channel and you had this volume off, you were rolling all the tone off of this channel and vice versa. And this channel also had a 330K mix resistor in line before the grid leak, which would always provide quite a bit of attenuation. And I'm going to let you hear this amp pretty much the way it would have been at max gain the other day before I made these changes. So this amp used to make barely any noise or made horrible noises that shorted out. We got it to the point where it made this sound. Not bad, and that's pretty much what the owner had been living with. But as I said to him, listen to the noise floor compared to the signal. So here's your signal. But listen to the background noise. And that's because the gain staging is odd in this amp. They do all the attenuation before the first preamp tube, and then there's no attenuation after that. So regardless of what level is being fed into the input tube, all the other levels are always set to stun. So you have a high noise floor compared to the music. And on later amps, not to get too far down the rabbit hole, the volume and any tone circuits will be moved after the initial gain stage or two. So as you turn the volume of your instrument up and down, you're also turning down the background noise. So you would only hear this amount of background noise in an amp that was very loud and typically overdriven. And as you turn it down to get to this clean range like we have here, the background noise would be almost non-existent. That's what we're used to. And that's something that started to happen, let's just say by the mid-50s, as amps began to be more consolidated, Electric guitars were more available from Gibson and from Fender, certainly. Silvertone, all the other brands started getting in the mix. Side note, the owner of this amp has a bunch of Teiscos with gold foils, which are great sounding pickups. Very low output, unique sounding pickups. I'll try to emulate that a little bit with this SG. Later, I'll turn the volumes down on the SG. I don't happen to have anything with gold foils, but the owner also uses an SG, so this is a good basis comparison. So I'm going to show the result of the change I've done, and I'm going to talk about the changes I'm going to make at this point and why, and I'll show you in a basic schematic explanation of what the flaws were with the existing circuit. So anyway, this was with the guitar volume at 10, and I had the guitar tone just at 2, which is about where it was in its brightest setting in the stock amp. Because of the way the channel's mixed. The channel's no longer mixed. This bank of inputs and this volume and tone are no longer active at all. We just have the microphone input and its 1.3 meg volume pot, and we have the controls for the tremolo. And it's not being mixed with anything else. It doesn't have that 330K dropping resistor. So the input of the 7589, 7859, I can't remember tube numbers. It is well, I'll pop it up on the screen. It's the pentode. Is being fed the full output of a guitar, which will now, if I turn the volume, I'll keep the volume at 10 on the guitar, turn the tone back up. So going from 2 on the tone, when we go to the pickup I have active, 10 on the tone. So now all of a sudden the input no longer has that blanket from the interaction forming an artificial tone circuit or accidental tone circuit. But now, because the input going to the first tube is not neutered, we can get much more gain. Turn the volumes down from 10 to, let's try 6 as an emulation of maybe the output level of a gold foil. We'll go down to 4 on the volumes. I don't know whether that's going to track exactly to how gold foils will do it in a Teisco, but it's a nice response. I should note that the response of using the guitar pickup or using this is pretty much the same. So if I turn the guitar volume to 3 on the bridge pickup and leave this at 10, that should be about the same as having this at about 3 and the guitar at about 10. So if you're okay with this being a possible sound you get out of this amp, then you can do all the volume controls from your guitar. And that's pretty cool. Or you can set this to be as loud as you ever want it to be. Let's say that right here is what you want it to max out at. Then you can approach that. You can back off from that. So that's a much better place to be. In a minute, I'm going to show you why it was sounding so anemic before and why this sounds better. And cosmetically, everything is still here, and it's just really lifting one capacitor and bypassing one resistor that gets you to this. I'll show that so the owner will have a record of it in case he ever wants to put back to stock, though why would be beyond me. This sounds really good. But I also want to talk about that background noise. Now that we have all this gain available, the amp has more than what is necessary. And so I'd like to go in and reduce gain and noise in some later stages, which in the stock amp are just left full throttle at all times, which is why we have this background noise at all times, no matter what the input level is. So since we have gain to spare, I mean, we've got a lot of gain here. We can get in there and reduce it. And get the amp a little bit quieter. Now there's an interesting thing I just noticed there. If I have the, let's see. If I have the guitar volume at 0 and I have this on there, it goes quiet. All right. That is going to be the AC wiring in the middle of the range. When it's all the way counterclockwise, the wiper's at ground. When it's all the way clockwise and the guitar input's at 0, it's at ground. In the meantime, we have a resistance to ground hanging off the input, and it's susceptible to the AC signal coming here for the fuse and the lamp and the power switch. And that's pretty much unavoidable, but I mean, I could undo that, but it would require more modification of the amp than the owner wants to do as far as rerouting signal wires and drilling new holes and stuff. It's an odd design from 49. Anyway, let me put this to the side and I'll show you why it's an odd design and what the fix, in my opinion, was. I would much rather have an amp that's capable of total world domination than be limited to always being a low output thing. But seriously, with the volume here on 10 and my guitar volume on 2, it's got more output than it did in stock form. Now part of that's going to be because the resistors and capacitors it was going through were 72 years old, but it sure is sounding a lot better now. All right, let's see how this comes out. So in the stock circuit, they've got 3 inputs on the instrument side, which goes to a 33K resistor here. And those are all joined. And the output of that, and it's a passive mix, there's no shunting or anything, goes to here. And then there is a pot like so, which goes to here. And they got a bright cap on that. That's half of the tone stack. And then they do another one where it goes And that's another part of the tone stack. And then the output of that goes to a 68K volume, and then through a 10 nanofarad cap. So 68K. This part right here with a variable resistor and a capacitor to ground, which is also it's a 5 nanofarad, is exactly what you'd find in a guitar tone circuit. And this one here with this 2 nanofarad, that's a treble bypass cap. So you got 500K here, you got 300K here, you have 68K, I'm sorry, 33K on each of these. So that's the instrument. We'll come back to that. The mic goes straight into a 1.3 meg volume pot, and then goes through a 10 nanofarad cap, and then a 330K resistor, and then joins here. And the output of that goes to a pentode, which I'm not going to try to draw properly, just say pentode. And its cathode is at ground. And so they have a big grid leak resistor here. It's a 2.2 meg. It's not that high for a grid leak bias. Pentodes don't need as much as a triode. And then, plate on the pentode. I'm not going to deal with the screen stuff on the pentode. And then the output of that goes through a 47 nanofarad cap, and then through a resistor to ground to the next stage. And that resistor to ground there is 470K. Now, this all is as they designed it. We're ignoring the vibrato stuff. And this has a problem no matter which way you do it. So if we were to take the signal coming from one of the instrument inputs, we'll just take one of the instrument inputs. We're going to ignore the tone circuit. We're going to bypass that because the treble roll-off works the same way as what happens in your guitar. And the treble bypass, the bright circuit, is just kind of awful. Is real exaggerated and would not be useful. So let's look at just what's happening to the circuit with one input of the 33K. So you have the 33K, and you've got the 68K volume. We can't really ignore the impact of that tone circuit, so we're going to show right here. And then that goes through that 10 nanofarad. And then for the other side, we're not using the mic input. So that's at ground. So the 330K resistor. And this goes to the pentode. We're not going to show all that stuff. So right here, if we were just running the instrument input, you got 33K making a huge voltage divider with that 68K. That's like having a 100K pot that never goes up above 2/3, even if that's maxed out. So you always have a huge amount of attenuation, and 100K is a terrible load for a guitar pickup. You will actually find that 68K value in some harmonies from that era. Very low input value volume pots, and it really makes those guitars sound artificially dark. Harmony is a Valco thing. This amp was made by Valco. It was a thing at the time, but it's not that great. So we've got this big voltage divider loading down the signal. We've got the wrong input impedance, making everything dark and kind of anemic sounding. It really affects the resonant peak of your guitar. Then you have this tone circuit. And then you have, after this cap, you have another tone circuit. And this one's always on. It's like having inverted, it's 330K away from ground in this case. So it's, it could be worse, it could be straight. We'll get to that. But you have treble roll off here. You have treble roll off here. You have treble roll off through the impedance here. And you have a huge voltage divider here. This is the same thing as doing this. $33K, $68K. That is a big voltage divider. So you're losing level here, both because of the voltage divider, you're losing level because of the impedance, you're losing signal strength and clarity because of the impedance, you're losing signal strength and clarity because you have all this tone stuff happening, being loaded down, that's unnecessary. So that's a good strike against using the instrument input. If we use the mic input, what we get starts off much better. 1.3 meg and through a 10 nanofarad cap, and a 330K resistor to the pentode. But if you have the instrument volume off, you also have a 10 nanofarad cap to ground. And that just dumps all the treble off. But let's say that the volume on the instrument input is not at ground. Let's say that it's at full. Then it's 68K. So a 68K tone pot would be dark in any guitar. Most guitarists know that. This is going to go from pretty dark to really dark at all times, which was just taking a huge blanket off the highs coming into the mic input. And there's also the fact that 330K resistor there is ahead of the 2.2 meg to ground. I'm not drawing this very well. That was the grid leak for this next stage. And 330K and 2.2 meg, that's another significant voltage divider. So what I have done in this amp, which is just a matter of moving, removing one capacitor and moving where another capacitor goes, is that we have now the input from the mic input, which goes to the 1.3 meg volume pot, goes to a 10 nanofarad, a new 10 nanofarad cap. We have bypassed the 330K resistor. The cap going to from there, this junction to the instrument inputs is no longer there. Then we have the 2.2 meg grid leak for the pentode. Pentode goodness. If I can remember how to draw things. So this gets rid of all that blanket, gets rid of all that attenuation, and now we've got a huge amount of gain. Now what I'm thinking, besides anything else in this amp, is that in this amp right here, between the first gain stage, the pentode, and the next triode, it just goes through has a 470K to ground here, and then goes to the triode. That's a good place to put a voltage divider to reduce the background noise in the amp. And if I play my cards right, say 150K, 330K, make a very subtle voltage divider, it will give us enough maximum gain that the amp still can get in that snarly range while reducing all the background shh. Now, one last note on this general idea. We get piece of paper here. Go back to this first one. Notice you have volume before the pentode, volume before the pentode. What later amps did, and some of its peers, there was a Gibson BR, I can't remember what model it was, from 48 or 49 that I did, that had already made the change. But certainly most of the Fenders that you're used to, and the AC15 that came out in 58, 59, which also has a pentode, instead of having the volume tones before the pentode, I'm just going to simplify this, but this is crucial. You'd have the input, and you would have a resistor to ground, you'd have a grid leak, you'd have your pentode, and you have cathode bias rather than fixed bias. That's for a different video. Again, we're going to ignore the screen stuff in a pentode. Just say VS right there. And then you would have your coupling cap, and that's where you would put your volume. And by doing that, all the self noise this stage is turned down as the volume is turned down. So if you want a clean sound, you're not amplifying all the background stuff. And by the time you turn it up to be overdriven, well, at that point, the white noise is far enough behind what you're playing. By turning down the signal here instead, that means that this white noise from this gain stage stays constant in the earlier amps like this one. So you're varying the signal level. So your signal level may go from that to that, back to that. But your white noise may be that at all times. This is a terrible drawing of that, of my intent, but it means that if this is zoomed in on this and this is your signal that you want, and there's white noise at all times like that, your white noise is almost as loud as your signal. Whereas if you were to do it in the later sense, and this is your signal, and everything's turned down together, this may be your white noise. So your signal stays much stronger compared to the background noise, the white noise that we don't want. And that's why amps went from having the volumes at the input to having them at least after the first gain stage. And you'll find that in pretty much every amp from every manufacturer that you know of, aside from some really strange little Velcos from the 50s and such. There's some Velco was made things for National, Silvertone, Gretsch. At this point, in 49, Epiphone, they did some strange things. Some of it sounds pretty cool, but most of which can be improved. And that's what we're doing here, because this was a crazy concept of how to do a guitar amp. It just had so many obvious drawbacks. And, you know, this is just so much better. And once I play around with the voltage divider here, and that's just adding another resistor, removing that connection, we should be able to get everything that we like about this and tame the white noise a little bit. The next level would be to drill additional holes in the big box covers on the back of the instrument control panel, where the knobs and jacks are. Terrible drawing. So here's the existing jack, which takes the input through the volume to the tube. Would add another one or two. So you'd have instrument going into the tube, and then from the tube to the volume, and then back. And that gets a little too complicated. There's not a lot of real estate. I think this is going to have to be the working compromise for this 49 Epiphone Zephyr.